Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. We're continuing our ACC football predictions today, and our next team just missed out on a bowl game, going 5-6, but returned a lot of offensive starters and should be stronger on the defensive side of the ball. They are the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. Georgia Tech went 5-6 last year, just missing out in the bowl, and could have maybe gone 6-6 had they played that game against Central Florida that got canceled to weather, or maybe if they had been able to pull out some of those close losses that they had on the year. But nonetheless, they're trying to get back to a bowl game, and they do have the team to do that with 13 returning starters, including a solid quarterback in Taquan Marshall, who rushed for over 1,100 yards last year at the quarterback position, leading that spread option offense that a lot of people like to call a high school offense or a weak offense, yet a lot of these teams don't know how to stop it, and if they do, they can't stop it effectively or consistently. So this is a Georgia Tech team run by Paul Johnson that has run this offense for years now, and it continues to work for them, so they're obviously not going to change it. The A-back's going to be Clinton Lynch. The B-back's going to be Kervontae Benson. They're going to be solid there, and they return 3 offensive linemen, which is obviously going to benefit this type of offense. They return 5 starters on defense, but they lose 8 of their top 12 tacklers from last year, so that does hurt them there. The defensive line, though, is going to be consisted of all seniors, so that's huge there. That's going to be one of their bigger strengths is that defensive line. The linebacking core is going to be led by Victor Alexander, another solid player there. And the secondary is kind of what scares me a little bit. They have 2 freshmen in the secondary, so I think if they're going to choose it, whether it's going to be defensive line, linebackers, or secondary, the secondary is going to be the weakest point of this Georgia Tech defense, and that's not good going up against some of these solid ACC quarterbacks that they're going to have to face this season. So they open up the season against Alcorn State, an easy win there. Should put up a lot of points there and just kind of see where everything is. I'm really curious to see how the defense does in this game now. It's kind of hard to get a good look at how your defense is going up against a weak FCS opponent, but you can go ahead and figure out things that they do wrong, clear up some mistakes, and they're going to need to before a road game at South Florida, who is still going to be a contender in the American Athletic Conference. If South Florida still had Quentin Flowers and some of their offensive players that they lost from last year, they only returned 6 starters on offense this year and 5 on defense. I would definitely be picking the Bulls in this one, but Quentin Flowers made up that team. Charlie Strong is still going to do a good job with them. He did a good job with them last year, but I'm going to give Georgia Tech a big-time win over a Group of 5 team on the road. And, you know, we consider South Florida is a Group of 5 team, but like Central Florida were very tough last year and will continue to be tough for the next few years. So, obviously, still going to be a tough out for Georgia Tech, but should be able to get the win there. Start ACC play in Week 3 at Pittsburgh. And this is going to be a really interesting game here. Pittsburgh, the team that, of course, the highlight of their season was beating Miami in the season finale, which they finished 5-7 on the year. This year they returned 4 starters on offense. Kenny Pickett, who led the upset over Miami, will be the starter this year, so that's good there. He has experience against a solid ACC defense and should put up some good numbers for the Panthers this year. And they returned 9 starters on defense, so that is certainly going to be the strength for the Panthers this year. And this is going to be a game that could play a major role in whether Georgia Tech gets back to a bowl game or not. I like the Panthers in this one just a little bit. I think Pickett's going to have a decent day against what I think could be a struggling Georgia Tech secondary, who at this point in the season isn't going to be able to fix all their problems yet. It's still fairly early. It is on the road as well, and I like the Pittsburgh defense to maybe shut down that Georgia Tech offense a little bit. So I'm going to give Georgia Tech a loss on the road at Pittsburgh. And then they get Clemson at home this year. On the road last year, they only lost to Clemson by 14, so it was fairly respectable. But Clemson's defense is by far one of the best in the nation, best in the ACC. They're going to have a solid quarterback, whether it's Kelly Bryant or Trevor Lawrence, solid running back and Travis Etienne. So they're going to be solid all around the board. And despite it being at home, I think Georgia Tech does lose this game. I don't see them generating much offense against this Clemson defense. I think if they're going to want to beat Clemson, they're probably going to have to win this game through the air. And Georgia Tech, of course, not being known for winning games with their pass. So I just don't see them beating Clemson at home. I don't see anybody beating Clemson this year. So it's not just a Georgia Tech thing. I think they stay at home. They beat Bowling Green there. So they're 3-2 going on the road to Louisville, who did lose Lamar Jackson after last year. And, I call them Lamar Jackson-less. I say Louisville's Lamar Jackson-less, and everybody thinks, oh, there's no Lamar Jackson. Louisville might not be that good, but they're still going to be solid. I still have a lot of faith in Bobby Petrino. I like Jawan Pass at QB. He faces Alabama in week 1, so that's a tough test for him and a good way to figure out what he needs to do better going up against one of the better defenses in the nation. And they have a very, very solid crew of wide receivers at Louisville. The defense will be the problem for Louisville and will be the difference maker in whether or not the Cardinals have a really solid year, maybe 8-win, 9-win, or maybe they go 7 or 6 wins or even miss out on a bowl. So the defense is going to be the kicker for the Louisville team this year, but I have a lot of faith in that offense, and they're going to be able to win this game through the pass. I think Georgia Tech goes on the road and loses. It's a road game. I like the Louisville offense better than I like this Georgia Tech defense, despite Georgia Tech having a solid defensive line. And this Georgia Tech offense, I think, is going to be potent once again. I really, really like Taquan Marshall. I don't think he gets enough credit, but I don't think they're going to be able to go on the road and beat Louisville. And then they come back home and they're playing against Duke. And this is going to be another interesting game. Duke, David Cutcliffe doing a great job with them. Daniel Jones, a quarterback that really kind of emerged onto the scene last year. Didn't put up great stats last year, but good enough to get them to a bowl game and will put up even better numbers this year. I think Georgia Tech at home gets the win over Duke. I think they're coming back home. They're coming off 2 losses in their past 3 games. The only win coming against Bowling Green. And I just don't see the Duke defense able to shut down this Georgia Tech offense. I like Georgia Tech to get the win here. In a big-time win at that. That's going to give them their 4th win, so they're going to be 4-3 going into the bye week. And if you look at the schedule, if Georgia Tech wants to get to a bowl game, this is the half of the schedule that they're going to really have to do some damage because the second half of the schedule is tough. After the bye week, at Virginia Tech, always a tough team in the Coastal Division, at North Carolina, who's going to be much improved after a horrendous 3-9 season last year, Miami, the heavy favorite in the Coastal, Virginia, who they should be, and then at Georgia, obviously the heavy favorite in the SEC East and national runner-up last year. So after the bye week, they play a Thursday night game on the road at Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech also is coming off a bye going into this game. So, last year Georgia Tech upset Virginia Tech at home. That Virginia Tech was number 17 in the nation. The Yellow Jackets were able to get the job done, winning by 6 points. So that is obviously a little bit of a chip on the shoulder for the Hokies. They're at home. It's going to be a short week for both teams, but I like this Virginia Tech offense. I like Josh Jackson. I like their running back situation. And Bud Foster always having a solid defense. As well at Virginia Tech. Has been there for 23 years, so I don't expect much to change there. I think Georgia Tech goes on the road, hangs with the Hokies, but does not come out with a victory. It'll be close, but I think they lose this game. And a lot of factors on that. I like the Virginia Tech offense a little bit more. It's a short week. Virginia Tech's coming off a bye. It's on the road. All those factors, I think, are pointing to a Georgia Tech loss here. And then on the road again at North Carolina, so back-to-back road games. And everybody thinks North Carolina, just because they had a 3-9 year last year, means that they're going to do horrible this year. Certainly not the case. They had a lot of injuries last year. Didn't really know what the identity was. We're playing 3 quarterbacks at one time. Chaz Surratt, Nathan Elliott, and Brandon Harris. So you had 3 quarterbacks playing for the Tar Heels in what was just a horrible season for them, but Larry Fedora is going to get the team turned around. They have their quarterback in Chaz Surratt as long as he can stay healthy, as long as the team can stay healthy in general. 8 returning starters on the defensive side of the ball. The only thing that concerns me about North Carolina in this game is they only have 1 returning offensive lineman that started last year. And they're going up against a solid Georgia Tech defensive line this year. Like I said, consisting of all seniors for this Georgia Tech defensive line, led by Desmond Branch, I should add as well. But I like this North Carolina offense. If the offensive line, especially this late in the season, has figured out that team chemistry, figured out what they need to do, and can shut down that Georgia Tech pass rush, I think North Carolina is going to get the win. If not, I think Georgia Tech gets the win. I'm leaning towards the Tar Heels' way, though, mostly for home field advantage and because of their offense. And I think in the end they can get a late stop on Georgia Tech with a much more experienced defense than they had last year. So another loss for the Yellow Jackets. And then Miami. Last year, Georgia Tech nearly beating Miami. I think they lost like in 25-24. Had the game won. Miami drove down the field. Ended up kicking a game-winning field goal to win the game 25-24. It is at home this year. So that's a huge benefit for Georgia Tech. And like I said, this is a Miami team that should be better than they were last year, but can't afford to get caught sleeping like they did last year against Pittsburgh, where they're coasting towards the end of the season. They're looking like they're a sure lock for the ACC championship or maybe a playoff spot, and they lose to a team they shouldn't, like maybe a Georgia Tech or like they did to Pittsburgh last year. Georgia Tech, I think, hangs with Miami in this game. But in the end, I think it's once again the Miami defense who's going to be better than they were last year, able to shut down this Georgia Tech offense. And I think the Miami offense is going to be a lot more improved and could surprise some people this year. A lot of people didn't like Malik Rozier last year. I thought he did a fine job. I think as long as he stays healthy, I think he's progressed over this offseason, should do fine. I think Georgia Tech loses this game at home, but it will be close. Last year it was close. I think it remains close this year, and I think it should come down to the wire. I just don't see Georgia Tech beating Miami this year. It's going to be a much better Hurricane team. A win over Virginia, a team that I don't really expect a whole lot out of this year. I really think they're going to struggle this year, losing Kurt Benkert at quarterback. Their strength is also going to be the defense, but Georgia Tech being at home, them still trying to be eligible for a bowl game. They win this, so they're going to set up a win-or-go-home game against the rival Georgia. I don't think they're going to have much trouble against the Cavaliers, but I think we'll really struggle this year. And then at Georgia, last year, Georgia Tech lost at home 38-7. The year before that, Georgia Tech beat Georgia on the road 28-27. 2 years ago, before that, so back in 2014, they also beat Georgia on the road. So they've won the past two on the road. I just don't see that happening this year. Yes, they've won the past two on the road. Yes, Georgia might be a little weaker than they were last year, but not by much. It's late in the season. Georgia will once again be the heavy favorite in the SEC East. I had them projected to win the SEC East. Could be vying for another spot in the college football playoff. Georgia is going to have another solid offense with Jake Fromm, DeAndre Swift, Mecole Hardman, Terry Godwin, all those guys on the offensive side of the ball. Yes, Georgia lost a lot of players on both sides of the ball, but it's not going to be a horrible Georgia team by any means. It is at home. It's a rivalry week. Georgia's want to go out on top on the season before they have a tune-up before the SEC championship game. I just don't see Georgia Tech going on the road. I think they scored more points than last year. They scored 7 points last year. I think they scored more than that. And maybe this game is close for a half. Maybe it's close for 3/4. Because Georgia Tech's really going to, one, just beat their rival. Number two, they know if we can win this game, we can get into a bowl game. So they're going to play their hearts out. I just don't see them being able to go on the road and beating the Bulldogs. So a loss here, which is going to give Georgia Tech a 5-7 record on the year. Now, I know some people think they should get back to a bowl game, that this team is better than the team that had 5 wins last year, so why would they finish with 5 wins again? It is a very, very difficult schedule. You look at this schedule, they're playing at South Florida, which is by no means an easy game there, another difficult team out of the American Athletic, and that's on the road. You've got Clemson out of the Atlantic. You've got Louisville on the road. And then obviously in their division, just the Coastal Division alone, you've got Miami, and then they're playing on the road at Virginia Tech and North Carolina. So arguably maybe one of the 3 best teams in the Coastal. 2 of them are going to be on the road. So this is by far not an easy schedule for Georgia Tech. Add Georgia to that in non-conference play, rivalry week as always. This is not an easy schedule. Georgia Tech, like I said, is going to have to pull up a couple upsets if they want to get to a 6-6 record or better. And I think if they're going to do that, their best bets are winning on the road at Louisville and on the road at Pittsburgh. Besides that, I don't see any other game that I feel comfortable saying Georgia Tech's going to win. Maybe North Carolina's could be thrown in there. I just don't see that happening, though. So maybe Pittsburgh and Louisville are the 2 games that if Georgia Tech wants to get to a bowl game, they're going to have to win. And like I said, they're going to have to make their move in this first half of the schedule because the second half of the schedule is brutal. So a 5-7 record for Georgia Tech this season. Would not be surprised if they can get to the 6-6 mark, but I'm going to keep them just short of a bowl game for the second year in a row. And we'll have to see what happens next year and see what happens for the Yellow Jackets this year. Maybe they'll surprise some people in the ACC, much like they did back in 2014 when they made the Orange Bowl. So as always, please go check us out on Twitter at Gridiron Expert, on Instagram at The Gridiron Expert, and always here on YouTube. Please continue to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you next time on The Gridiron Expert.